Hey, Candace.
Hey Shane, I'm texting you right now as we speak.
Okay. Good morning, Chief Cook. Are Brenda and Sanjay part of your team?
I don't see them yet.
I see them. I just wanted to make sure to bring them over. I wasn't sure if they're part of your team or not. I'll do
Oh
that.
yeah. No, yeah. Brenda and Sanjay should be moved up to be able to present. Thank you.
You got it.
Hey,
Morning.
Sanjay.
Hey, how you doing?
Good morning. Hi, Chris.
Counselor, it's good to see you again. I'm like a bad penny. Can't get rid of me.
Keep turning up. Yeah. It's a busy time.
It is.
Yeah. Thank you for all your work, though. We're doing some really incredible stuff for the environment, and you just have to
No.
keep plugging away at it, you know?
Yeah, literally, I just say the words in front of me. It's all these other people who are doing the work. Counselor, I don't know if you met Sanjay yet. He's heading up our resilience efforts. We'll hear from him a little bit
It's
later.
great to meet you. Glad to be here today.
Hi, Sanjay.
And I think we have Brenda on as well somewhere.
Yes, I'm here. Hello.
Hey, Brenda, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Counselor, how late did last night's meeting go?
Which one are we talking about?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I did. You guys have long days. I meant the sesquicentennial hearing. Sorry.
Oh, it went, I think it went to almost 5:30 because there was a 5 o'clock, another 5 o'clock hearing that didn't get started because, you know, as it would happen if we were in Ionella Hall chamber, you know, you can't move in until somebody else moves out. So
Right.
I think it ended about, you know, 20 past 5, about 20 past 5, and then the other hearing started about 5. It was supposed to start at 5, so went over a little, but it was very good to see such an enthusiastic
Yeah.
response.
It is.
And, you know, I don't know what the chances are of extending the demolition delay process a little longer. Like 90 days is very, very short. So
Yeah, we're happy to.
I'm going to talk to Councillor Bach and see if she'd be interested in proposing I don't know, that would be an ordinance probably or something. Would that come in as an ordinance or would it
Yeah,
come
but
in under?
I think we'd start as a working session, right?
Okay.
Yeah, that would
Yeah.
be my guess. And then, you know, I know there's a lot of advocates who have a lot of very good, strong ideas. So.
Yeah. You know, I'm not against development per se, but I see so many, you know, more vernacular structures and things that are vestiges of a former time, but have a lot of character and have a significance in the history of the community, and they're just going away. You know, they're being demolished and lost, and you know, it's not that sentimentality is one thing, but and very often when they're lost, we lose the green space as well. You know,
Of course.
we lose the green space, and we end up with you know, a less permeable, a less healthy space, I think, in the after that. So
No, that's where most of our tree canopy loss has been, on the private
yeah,
property.
private development. Yeah.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Great to see everybody. Morning, Liz. Morning, Chief. Hey there, Zoe. Hey, Brad. We'll get started in just one moment. Chief, you're going to be presenting on behalf of the administration with an assist from Zoe and Brad?
Yes, sir.
Okay, terrific.
We also are joined by Sanjay and Brenda Pike as well.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. I don't see them on my screen, but are they here?
Yeah,
Are
they
they-
already got promoted, so they'll be able to answer questions if it's time.
Perfect. Okay, perfect.
Promoted in Zoom world. I apologize
Indeed.
for using that lingo.
They all deserve
They-
promotions and
Everyone
recognition.
deserves promotions as well. Yes.
I love it. And thank you, Liz. I believe you're the only other counselor who is here, so thank you. So, and then who's our central staff? Is this Shane or Candace?
Hi, Mr. Chair. How you doing?
Hey, buddy, how are you?
I'm well. We're live and rolling right now. Just to let you know.
Excellent. All right. So, Chris, you want to do a soliloquy from Shared Madness before we get started?
No,
That's
thank
not
you,
some
sir.
of those chopping, those chops.
No, thank
right.
you, sir.
Well, I'm in the hall today. I don't have I'll use my fist to gavel this into order. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Boston City Councilor Matt O'Malley, and I'm the chair of the City Council's Committee on Environment, Resiliency, and Parks. We are here today to discuss two dockets, dockets 1000 and 1033. Today is December 8th, 2020, and this public hearing is being recorded and live streamed at boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will be rebroadcast on Xfinity Channel 8, RCN Channel 82, as well as Verizon Fios Channel 964. We will take public testimony at the end of this hearing. If you wish to testify via video conference, please email shane.pack, that's SHANE.PAC, at boston.gov to sign up. He will, of course, be monitoring that through the duration of this hearing. As I mentioned, today we're discussing two dockets, docket number 1000. And I will say in my 10 years on this body, I don't think I've ever had such a elegantly numbered docket 1000, as well as 1033 within the Environment, Resiliency, and Parks Committee. I'm joined, of course, by my vice chair on this committee, great environmental advocates, Councillor Liz Braden, who we will hear from shortly. Docket number 1000 refers to an order authorizing the City of Boston to accept and expend the amount of $280,070 in the form of a grant for the Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Program, or MVP, Action Grant. This grant was awarded by the Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs and will be administered by the Environment Department. This grant will fund a 2-year heat resilience planning study for the City of Boston. The study will build on heat preparedness work to date and explore potential heat mitigation strategies to identify infrastructure solutions. Afterwards, we will discuss docket 1033, which refers to an order authorizing the City of Boston to participate in the Massachusetts Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, or the PACE Massachusetts, PACE, Property Assessed Clean Energy. PACE, which is administered by Mass Development, enables low-cost, long-term funding for energy improvements in existing commercial, industrial, nonprofit, multifamily buildings with 5 or more units. This order authorizes the city to enter into a municipal assessment and assignment agreement with Mass Development, thereby allowing building owners in Boston to participate in the statewide financing program. These run so nicely with efforts that I've been working alongside Chief Cook, my colleagues on the council, and of course, Mayor Walsh, to really solidify net zero building standards in the City of Boston, something that we are absolutely all committed to. And this is just another way that we can help buttress that and again show that not only is funding available, but we're at the point now where you will often save money both in the short term and certainly in the long term with energy efficiency and getting to net zero construction for new buildings. I am delighted to have this, will likely be the last hearing of the Environment Committee before the end of the calendar year, and we wanted to make sure that we were able to get these grants passed. These hearings are terrifically easy because we all support them, but it's a great opportunity to hear from Chief Cook and his team to get more understanding of how it works and make sure that we can help promote it. So really look forward to turning it over to Chief Cook and his team. Before I do that, Councillor Braden, did you have any opening comments or thoughts?
No, I'm delighted to be here this morning. I'm excited to hear more about the heat resiliency and heat mitigation program. Out here in Alston Brighton, that's urban heat island effect is a major issue. I look forward to the discussion and learning more about these programs. Thank you.
Fabulous. Thank you, Councillor Braden. So Chief Cook, I know you have your all-star team with you. Do you want to introduce them and then just we'll take it from there?
Absolutely, Councillor. Thank you very much. Starting with the heat resilience planning, we're joined by Sanjay Seth, who's our climate resilience program manager, as well as Zoe Davis, who will actually be managing this program for us. As you know, the City of Boston has been granted $280,070 through the Commonwealth of Massachusetts Municipal Vulnerability Preparedness Action Grant, the MVP grant. And that's a very long title for what is an incredibly good idea that's been rolled out by the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, which is individual communities are actually assessing their most acute vulnerabilities, and then the state is actually funding programs to move those vulnerabilities and planning and action for them along. So this is really strong leadership by Secretary Theorides and the Baker administration to help communities plan for these vulnerabilities. I'll let Zoe and Sanjay go through the details of the grant, but I'll start with a very broad picture, which is in 2015 through Climate Ready Boston, we assessed in the city our major vulnerabilities. And there's some that don't come as any surprise. You know, as a coastal city, we're incredibly vulnerable from sea level rise. And we've already taken strong action to begin planning for that through Resilient Boston Harbor. Through our open space development and our parcel prioritization plan, we've also leaned into the ability to acquire new conservation land or expand conservation land to deal with our future stormwater management needs. Through our urban forestry plan, we want to be intentional of planning with that parcel prioritization plan, not only on the stormwater aspect, but on the aspect that you're going to hear about today with heat. So the only thing I would say is that heat is a byproduct of the climate crisis that we have to deal with and plan with today. Heat kills people in the United States of America already. And of course, all of that has been exacerbated through COVID-19. You know, the pandemic has shown that particulate matter puts socially vulnerable populations at even more of an acute risk through heat. And so mitigation on heat and planning for that is going to be very, very important as we look towards decades of health for our city. So with that, I would turn it over to Sanjay and Zoe.
Thank you. And just Mr. Septimus Davis, before you start, I wanted to acknowledge you've been joined by District 8 City Councilor Kenzie Bach as well. Welcome, Councilor Bach. Mr. Septimus Davis, please proceed. Thank you, Chief Cook.
Thank you, Chief Cook. Thank you, councilors. So one, it's great to meet you and nice to be working on this project. I'm joined by Zoe Davis, who, as Chief Cook mentioned, will be leading the project management for this project. But just a quick overview of the overall scope of this, and then I'll pass it to Zoe. You know, what we really want to end up with at the end of 2 years from now is an implementation roadmap, actually figuring out how do we do the things that we identified in this study. So the goal is really to make sure that when we go through this process of focusing on communities that have specific and disproportionate impacts, looking at and assessing urban heat island dynamics within each of these communities, really tying it into the community experience and the people who are experiencing heat risk today. And then really thinking through heat resilience strategies that are tied to Boston in particular, things that we can do here that may be unique to the neighborhood or unique to the community or to the population we're serving. So we want to have a really grounded, tailored approach to heat resilience for these communities that, for many different reasons, have experienced public health and other disparities in their experience of living in Boston. And so the overall picture of this plan is really, you know, setting the stage for a long-range implementation strategy and things we can also do today. With that, I'm going to pass it over to Zoe to maybe speak a little bit more about the structure of the engagement that we'll be doing, as well as the structure of the analysis we'll be doing.
Thank you, Sanjay. One quick thing I'll also add is that for this process, it's really important for us to recognize the amazing work that's already been done. And so what we'll be doing for the first part of this project is assessing what has been done through a literature review and essentially working with the Public Health Department, OEM, and other departments that are involved in heat-related work to understand what has been done previously. And then we'll be going through an assessment of urban heat island dynamics and heat risk, looking at that spatially. So using the maps that have already been created, potentially supplementing that with some additional maps as well. The third piece of this project is looking forward to a robust community-driven engagement process. So there are a couple of elements to that. First is community engagement through a community advisory board, which will be representative of the focus areas for this project. Another element of the community engagement piece is working with folks to actually visualize what some of these solutions could look like. And so that we're anticipating will take the form of community conversations or a charrette style event where we're listening to folks as to how they're envisioning what their communities will look like and what some of those solutions could look like in their communities. The next element of this is to tie in all of the past literature review, the elements of the urban heat island and risk assessment, and all of the community engagement feedback to develop the heat resilience strategies. So we're anticipating what that looks like as a toolkit of individual solutions that could be applied. Some of the metrics that go along with that so that we can be measuring process and the associated goals with that. And the intention is to sort of develop resilient solutions so that we can understand what a combination of some of these solutions might look like in a space over time. And finally, as Sanjay said, looking at all of this along an implementation roadmap and presenting this in a final public report.
Thank you. Is that those are the two speakers, Chief Cook, for the first
Yeah,
doc-
so that's on the heat, and we're happy to answer any questions on that before we move on to
Yeah.
police.
Let's take this bit by bit just because they're pretty straightforward. Thank you. I noticed you've been joined as well by City Councilor at Large, Anissa Saibi George. Oh, there she is. Thank you, Councilor George. So I appreciate that oversight. Obviously, this is something that we absolutely support. I was trying to multitask and find the statistic. Maybe one of you guys know. I remember reading this not too long ago, and Chief Cook and I are around the same age, a little bit longer in the tooth than some of these panelists. But I know he and I remember when we were young, you know, a heat wave would be a rare occurrence in the city of Boston.
Right.
We might have 2 in the summer. We'd be looking at 6 or 7 days that would hit 90 degrees for the entire summer. And I know that number will triple, certainly double and triple. And we're seeing that just continue to grow. So I'm wondering if, you know, you can talk briefly, and Zoe or Sanjay, feel free to hop in here, what some strategies would be to, obviously this is a relatively modest grant, and it's $200,000 but in $70, but relatively modest for all the work that we need to do. But is primarily just going to be lay the groundwork of where we would need to plant more trees, of where we'd maybe have to have more canopies. Can you just sort of talk what you foresee, recognizing the fact that there'll be a community process and community meetings and charrettes, but what are some strategies that you think that we'll employ as a result of this?
Yeah, I'll start, and then others feel free to chime in. But so much of this really is about the urban tree canopy for the city. So as you said, you know, a heat wave in our city is defined as 3 or more days of 90 degrees or above. Well, our climate reality, our climate future is going to be an entire summer of 90 degree days. And so if you start looking at, you know, 60 to 90 days of over 90 degree heat, you know, you literally need to find space within the public realm for people to get a respite. You know, trees are interesting. So they cool from the shade, but it's actually the water vapor that trees produce that actually has a cooling effect within a community. And it's about that entire tree canopy. So the public realm is an important place to plant, but it's also the idea of protecting as much tree canopy as you can on privatized land. But it's not just trees, of course. You know, it's permeable surfaces. It's you know, the use of making sure that you're reducing the urban heat island so that it's not actually storing that heat to be released all night long, especially in socially vulnerable neighborhoods. There are pavement treatments that are being piloted now in other cities that we could actually look into and take on. There have been, you know, different colors that have been used for the treatment of pavement and roads to try to reflect some of that heat. There are conflicting studies on some of those aspects. So there's a lot of different best practices,
So
as Zoe said in the
that
literature
last
review, that we'll have
part's-
to apply.
Sorry, Chris. So that last part's interesting. So it's something as simple as perhaps having, you know, light colored or white asphalt could potentially be a way to reflect some solar rays.
Yeah, that's been employed in multiple cities, and there is conflicting literature right now as to how effective that's been. But in New York, there was a large initiative to actually paint the roofs of buildings, because of course buildings within neighborhoods were absorbing heat too. So those are some of the elements that we'd be looking at.
One would think also that in addition to painting roofs different colors, having big, beautiful light PV panels on top of roofs would be another way that we could help address that. And to that end, I know an issue that you and I have talked about is that gas leaks often kill these trees. So getting back to the first part, the more that we can move away from our reliance on fossil fuels like natural gas, the better we can give these trees that we do plant an opportunity to live and thrive and serve their purpose. This seems pretty straightforward. I want to let my colleagues jump in with some questions. Councillor Braden is up next, followed by Councillor Bach, and then Councillor Asaibi George. So Councillor Braden, the floor is yours.
Thank you. You know, in terms of the tree canopy is a vital part of the puzzle, and it's really I don't know what more we can do to try and, well, education is a big piece of it, but trying to incentivize property owners to keep their trees, like especially the more mature trees that have been there for a long time with a well-established tree canopy. They're definitely a huge asset compared to maybe a younger sapling tree that's just been, it hasn't been established and is very, very, very vulnerable to heat and vandalism, etc. So I don't know, have we got a strategy to try and incentivize tree canopy or disincentivize folks from taking them down?
So Councillor, I think you brought up a good point. Education is a big part of it. And there's a huge difference between a full mature tree from, you know, a particulate matter standpoint, from a stormwater management standpoint, from a carbon sequestration standpoint, from its impact on the urban heat island. So there's a lot of things trees give us and they don't ask for much in return. So we really should try to protect them. Frankly, a major component of the urban forestry action plan that is underway right now, we've already done the round of interviews for consultants, will be the development of an ordinance. You know, as important as education is, I think we are going to have to develop an ordinance to protect mature trees on private land.
Yeah, and you know, if a developer takes down a mature tree to build something, then there should be some sort of a commitment that they will plant 5 trees somewhere to replace that tree that went down, you know. So the other issue that I noticed being a city dweller is that when you're downtown, the level of cooling that happens in big buildings, that they just pump all the heat out into the neighborhood. And you know, I read somewhere of a very quirky and sort of interesting solution would be to change the dress code in the summertime so that don't cool the buildings as much, and then change the business dress code so that we'd be more like a Bermuda shorts community rather than a 3-piece suit community, especially you guys that wear your suits all summer. I think in places that have historically warmer parts of the world, they have business wear that reflects the weather and the climate. So it seems like because I know that draws a huge amount of energy in the summer, and it causes brownouts when there's too much of a draw on the because of cooling. And I know from our neighborhood here that in a really intense heat, you know, down in Alston where there's a documented heat island, the differential in temperature can be up as much as 4 or 5 degrees compared to a more leafy part of the neighborhood that has more trees. It's really quite startling. Thank you.
I think you're right, Councillor. And as far as the idea about the dress code, that's what true climate adaptation is going to have to be. We're looking at a climate that's going to be much closer to Charlotte or to Baltimore, Maryland in our future. And so there's going to have to be adjustments made, not only in the way that we live, but in our public realm where we live.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. I wholeheartedly endorse the idea of Bermuda shorts, and we'll be making sure we can make this happen. I think Chief Cook will join me, so I appreciate that.
I'm already there.
Thank you, Councillor Michael.
I should be careful what I wish for. I probably don't look good in Bermuda shorts.
Indeed. Well, without worrying about an election next year, I can have the freedom of showing off Bermuda shorts. We've been joined by at-large Councillor Michael Flaherty as well, so thank you and welcome, Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Kenzie Bach, the floor is now yours.
Thank you so much, Councillor O'Malley. Yeah, I wanted to pick up on the paving question, and specifically, I mean, it seems like aside from painting, just like more permeable pavement materials are a pretty critical piece of this, both from a stormwater management side and then the urban heat island effect. And I just wonder, it sort of relates to a broader question I have about this, which is, it sounds like, you know, this is a planning grant to think through what we should be doing. But I'm always interested in sort of like, what's our trajectory for going from great plans to action, and especially when you're talking about a situation with climate change that demands a great deal of urgency from all of us. And so I just think about the fact that it can take a while for things like different materials to be used in public works. And especially when we're talking about different materials that, as I understand it, need a little bit more maintenance than some of the set it and forget it materials of our past that are not very climate friendly. And so I would hate for this to go way down a planning road and not be bringing along with it the city departments that we're going to need to execute. So I just wonder if you could speak to that a bit, Chief Cook and the team.
Yeah, no trouble at all. And I think it's an incredibly important call out. So part of all of Sanjay and Zoe's, and frankly, all the environment department that's focused on adaptation, the majority of the work is intergovernmental, right? And I use that word because it goes beyond just the city departments. You know, you start dealing with agencies like the Boston Water and Sewer Commission, the Massachusetts Water Resource Authority, Massport, you know. So, you know, when a kid is feeling the effects of climate change, meaning that kid has asthma because it's hotter and there's particulate matter in the air, it doesn't matter to the kid or to the kid's parents, nor should it, who owns the piece of property that kid is walking through in the public realm. So we all have to work together. To your point, though, these are not simple solutions. You know, it's one thing to say we need as many trees as possible. Well, in order to accommodate those trees, you start looking at the permeable surfaces or the drainage infrastructure, which do have maintenance costs associated with them. The thing that we all have to put forward in our public values, though, is that the climate crisis, if unabated, will have far deeper health-related costs or far deeper economic impacts than actually making these changes. So yes, it will cost a little bit more to maintain these properties and maintain these materials, but it's a worthy investment. The last thing, a specific call out on the permeable surfaces, especially to accommodate trees and stormwater management. The color of those rubberized surfaces or the color of those materials is incredibly important. You know, we've had to remove safety surfacing at our playgrounds before because kids would take off their shoes to go barefoot. They actually got burnt at Paris Street in East Boston. That's a perfect example of how the urban heat island is affecting us today. So color choices and then providing shade for those materials is going to be really important. Sanjay, Zoe, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
No, I think that's exactly right, Chief Cook and Councillor Bach. I think your point about, you know, we want to actually be able to do something after this planning process that we can implement. I think that's exactly right. And that's the goal of our team. And there's going to be some near-term things that we can look at. To Councillor Braden's point about behavior and the experience of heat, in addition to things that we can put in the ground and build for the long term. Your point is well taken about the cycling of building materials over time is really, you know, that's the long term for us. And that's really thinking about, as buildings are replaced or as new development comes in, how do we start helping people increase their ambition for things that are cost effective. And incorporating the cost of the experience of heat into that. I would say, you know, one of the best practices that's coming around in this field right now is really thinking not just about the kind of experience of heat in terms of like a map and just thinking about where is it going to be hotter depending upon the conditions, but the personal experience of heat. How are people in their building experiencing heat? How is someone walking down the street experiencing heat? To Councillor Braden's point about walking through downtown and people are blowing heat on you, and that's not very nice. I think you know, we really want to get into that as well. And some of that will help us define solutions that are more near term and maybe things that we won't need to have as much intergovernmental work that needs to kind of go into that before we can move forward. So we'll definitely be looking for a wide range of solutions here, things we can do without extensive collaboration, things that require extensive collaboration and are really valuable, things that citizens and residents can do without us getting involved at all in terms of behaviors and personal adaptations. But your point is very well taken about making sure this isn't a plan that just kind of sits.
And just sorry, Mr. Chairman, just a quick follow up on that. What do we think the timeline is for this actually generating like recommendations? Like at what point are you sitting with Public Works and saying like, because of this study that we did and the lived experience perspectives that we got and the survey of the literature, this team is making the recommendations that we transition towards using these materials more in our cityscape, in our public spaces, and also encourage our partners. Because I take your point, Chief Cook. I mean, I obviously have lots of DCR land. There's lots of complicated jurisdictional things. I still think there's an enormous part of the city of Boston that's under our jurisdiction. And so just, but interdepartmental things can be as fraught as intergovernmental things sometimes. So, I'm trying to understand that piece.
So by the end of summer 22, we will finish the scope of work. But that being said, all of the climate ready work is advised by those other agencies. And so it won't be distributing our recommendations to those agencies. It'll be our collective recommendations as a city because they are part of our effort. So for instance, in the adaptation work in parks and public realm for coastal solutions from sea level rise, we put forth the options that we collectively as city departments develop.
Okay. Yeah, and then the one of the things, I'm sure I'm out of time, is just I mean, I think trees are so important and big shade trees. Obviously, it feels like we also need to look here at just like aspects of the built environment that can create shade, the question of like bus stops that create shade, just like trying to think about other things. I'm sure you guys are looking at that.
Yeah, Brad, I understand that this is the adaptation portion, but it might be good for you to highlight the smart utilities.
Thank you, Chief. Listening to the need for collaboration, the Boston Smart Utilities policy that was just made permanent by the BPDA board a month or two ago after a 2-year pilot. One of the technologies is green infrastructure. And the strength of this program is that we have a steering committee that includes the most important city departments that deal with utility infrastructure, including Boston Water and Sewer Commission. And we've already identified the opportunity to use heat mapping to target areas where we work with private developers who are going through the zoning review process of the BPDA and have to comply with the smart utilities policy. And so we're thinking about ways in which we can target green infrastructure technologies to address very specific areas of the city that are already suffering from very severe heat moments. And so I'm truly looking forward to this study, to collaborating with my adaptation colleagues, and to continue the interagency coordination that has resulted in the smart utilities policy and its ability to get private developers to contribute to this solution.
And if I may add, for the study that we're doing currently, just to speak to the concern around intergovernmental, interdepartmental work, this project from the very beginning will be led by a steering committee in addition to our community advisory board. And that steering committee includes Boston Public Health Commission, OEM, BPDA, D&D, Parks, BWSC, BTD. So we are really making sure that we front load that question, because if we come up with solutions that they're not comfortable with, it won't happen. So we do have a steering committee in the overall plan.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Block. Councillor Anissa Saibi George is next, followed by Councillor Michael Flaherty and Councillor Ed Flynn. Councillor Saibi George, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any additional questions, just a special request that they be cargo shorts and not Bermuda shorts. But I think that that's an interesting idea, that we are sort of modifying our behaviors for sure when we think about being better prepared as a city. I am curious. I do have a question. I was just being a little fresh and trying early morning humor before I finished my third cup of coffee. Have we looked at all, and this is not directly related to today's hearing, so stop me if you'd like. Have we looked at all at the changing, because of COVID, the changing behaviors and capacity of our city's buildings and sort of the changes in traffic, although I think traffic is coming back. Have we looked at that, the impact of that? And will we see some longer term positive impacts of less traffic on climate?
Counselor, I wish I had good news for you. I actually think we're going to see some long-term negative effects, or excuse me, some short-term negative effects, particularly on traffic. What we're seeing right now is a return to cars and a return to, one person commuting in those vehicles. So as the city, fully reopens, as the Commonwealth fully reopens, what we really need, and this is why, I think the council's support and Mayor Walsh's stance on the proposed MBTA cuts is so important. We need people to fully embrace public transportation again, because if we don't have that efficiency of moving a high volume of people, we are in the short term going to feel strong effects on our emissions goals, but also just the effects of pollution in our air from the traffic, as well as the increased heat. If that volume of cars comes back and people are in the cars as opposed to T's. Now we do think that'll be short time. Over the period of COVID-19, there's been huge emissions reductions globally, but those will recalibrate. One positive, and I do think it relates to the second grant we'll be discussing today, is the renewed interest in air quality in buildings, and that dovetails very well with the electrification of HVAC systems in our city. So we could hit those climate goals and actually provide cleaner air, more air exchange in these buildings as you move towards electrified systems. So those are some of the lessons learned we've seen from COVID.
Great, thank you very much, Chief Cook. Thank you, Councilor O'Malley.
Thank you, Councilor Sabi George. Councilor Flaherty, you're up next, followed by Councilor Flynn.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. Obviously, it's great to see the chief and his team. I didn't recognize the chief without his glasses. So while we're on the subject of attire, I think safari hats may be in order with the new outfits from Parks. So he'd look great in one. But I want to thank him and his team for their great work on the city's behalf and his commitment to the environment, as I am as grateful to you, Mr. Chair, and all the great work you've done. So I'm just here on record to say that I'm going to plan to support both dockets and look forward to continue working together in partnership and making our city the cleanest and greenest and most efficient city when it comes to our commitment to the climate and to the environment. So with that, I'll defer to the panel.
Thank you very much, Councilor Flaherty. And I'm not going to miss an opportunity to capitalize on what you said. Part of the adaptation is sun protection. So that does move towards, providing headwear for some of our workers. That may be something we have to look into. But also I want to highlight that Councilor O'Malley's tenure actually brought sunscreen to our public parks. And so that is a major adaptation we will have to take advantage of. Thank you.
Thank you for mentioning that, Chief Cook. And do you know how many states now, after Boston being the first major city, how many states in the country offer free sunscreen dispensers in their park, at least in some parks or open areas?
I don't, Councilor.
All 50. Alaska joined us earlier this year. So now all 50 states have followed the lead of our great city. So thank you for your partnership there. And thank you for your kind words, both you and Councilor Flaherty. Councilor Flynn, you will be closing out questioning for this first docket. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Councilor O'Malley. I was listening to the conversation and I thought, the sunscreen proposal was one of the best proposals I've seen. It's impacted melanoma and skin cancer, has impacted so many families across Boston. And generations ago, people went to play ball without putting any sunscreen on. That's just the way the way it was back then, but now due to education and sunscreen, such as the proposal you worked on with the mayor and Chris Cook, it's helped so many families. And when I hear people, thinking it's a joke, or I hear it often, but it's one of the best proposals I've ever seen out of city government. So I just want to acknowledge the role of you, Matt, and Chris, and the mayor.
It's real, Counselor. It's one of the most popular programs in Boston parks, and it's all because of Counselor O'Malley's leadership.
Well, that's good to hear, and thank you to the parks team and the mayor's team for working with the councilor. Chris, you and I worked on a lot of issues, especially on air pollution, air quality, as it relates to some of the downtown areas. What is the short-term goal and the long-term goal of tree canopy, getting more trees in and around the downtown areas, knowing that we do have some air quality challenges coming from the highway, certainly, but we also want to make sure that the residents in the neighborhood of the Bay Village, of Chinatown, of the Leather District also have the trees so that they can enjoy them, for their public health as well. What's that balancing act like, and what can we do to improve it?
Thank you, Counselor. It's a good question. So overall, the tree canopy goal the city of Boston that the mayor has set is 35%. And that would put us in the upper echelon of cities, across the country, major urban areas, especially cities that are as dense as Boston. We're at 27% right now, which sounds good until you go to some of those neighborhoods that you just mentioned, Counselor. What does 27% citywide tree canopy mean to you if you're in Bay Village or if you're in Chinatown and you're breathing some of the worst air in the entire Commonwealth because of the transportation infrastructure there and because of the built environment? So a big part of the urban forestry action plan and its work in coordination with this heat resilience plan is identifying the neighborhoods that we have to be intentional about transforming the public realm for the health benefits. And that's work that can't wait. So, we've really focused on neighborhoods like East Boston and South Boston that are the two lowest tree canopied neighborhoods in the city. In neighborhoods like Chinatown, it is very, very difficult because of the utility infrastructure and just how dense those buildings are. And so there you start to look at redevelopment opportunities of, is there expanded green space when a project goes into development? Is there the opportunity for a green roof? Or is there an opportunity for a third public space, a piece of property that the public can have access to that's either inside of a building or part of a building's plaza, but feels welcome to the community? And then one last thing that I just want to mention is that we have to be very, very intentional about people to get relief from the heat. And that is something as simple as expanding our water park system. As you look at places like the Rose Kennedy Greenway, by far the most popular feature on the Rose Kennedy Greenway is the Rings Fountain during the summer. And, kids from all over the city go take advantage of that. We were absolutely heartbroken to not be able to operate the Frog Pond this year on Boston Common, because Boston Common serves as the neighborhood park for Chinatown. And so kids were deprived of that ability to cool. So those are the kind of changes that we'd like to see. Places like Reggie Wong Park, is there an opportunity for more shade or a water feature at that park so kids can benefit? That's where we have to be really intentional about the work.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. And just one final area I should have mentioned too is it's not too far from Councilor Asabi George's home as well, or in my home, but the area in and around Andrew Square also has a lot of environmental challenges, air pollution challenges, a lot of heavy traffic going through there, a lot of automobiles as well. what are your thoughts about that area, and what can we do to improve it as in terms of whether it might be open space or it might be tree canopy?
So I think there's a couple of opportunities. One is to fully implement the recommendations of the Dorchester Ave planning that the BPDA went through. There is an ability to add density, but also expand the public realm. If you had a contiguous system of public realm that brought you from the South Bay Harbor Trail and the end of Fort Point Channel to Moakley Park, that could be very transformative. If people had a safe green connection to Moakley Park, to the ocean, you're only a 10-minute walk from Moakley Park there, but you feel like you're miles away, right? It's a completely different environment, as you said. And then just to be really intentional about the immediate public realm, often in the city, it's the legacy that the Parks Department, and the Parks Department does an amazing job of it. The Horticulture Division would go beautify plazas and squares with ornamental plantings that provide some seasonality, some cheer to the neighborhoods and really beautify it. Are some of those spots opportunities for us to actually put a tree in, where we actually see the benefit of tree canopy as opposed to seasonal plantings? That's the choices we have to make. Andrew Square might be one of those options.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you, Matt.
Of course. Thank you, Councilor Flynn, and thank you again for those kind words. Hearing and seeing no further comments or questions from my colleagues, now is the time to speak or forever hold your peace. We will conclude the first part of this hearing on docket 1000. Obviously, I will be calling for passage of this or acceptance of this grant at tomorrow's council meeting. Now we are shifting gears to the second and final aspect of this hearing, which is docket 1033. Again, it is an order that authorizes the city to participate in the Mass Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy Program, or PACE, Massachusetts. I love being an environmentalist, and I love our love of acronyms in the environmental world. So Chief Cook, take it away. And I think you may have Brad and Brenda chime in on this one as well, and we'll do a round of questions after. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I mean, we already talked about the adaptation part of climate change, and now this is really about mitigation. How are we not going to continue to contribute to the problem that got us here in the first place? And that's fossil fuels in our buildings. So how can we decarbonize? One of those tools is PACE. So it's the Commercial Property Assessed Clean Energy PACE program. It's a financing mechanism for energy improvements in existing buildings. So with that context, in the issue of time, I'm going to turn it over to Brad Swing, who is the Director of Energy Policy and Programs for the City of Boston, as well as Brenda Pike, who is our Climate Advisor through the American Cities Climate Challenge.
Thank you, Chief. This order would have Boston participate in the statewide commercial PACE program that Mass Development has rolled out per legislative direction, starting in a piece of legislation enacted by the legislature in 2016. It's taken a few years because Mass Development needed to get some statutory refinements and revise how it was going to roll it out, and they are now ready to roll it out. And this is really quite vital because it facilitates private property owners to participate in long-term energy efficiency loans. And that is so important because a lot of energy efficiency work deals with the mandate for extremely short paybacks. And that often will only loan money to do improvements like lighting, which has a very quick payback. But if we're going to achieve our climate goals, it's absolutely vital that large buildings in Boston, commercial, industrial, nonprofit, and multifamily buildings with 5 or more units, the ones that are eligible to participate in the PACE program, it's vital that they be able to have long-term energy efficiency loans up to 20 years. That way you can have the quick paybacks of, say, lighting, help cross-subsidize, help pay for the measures that are absolutely vital for climate that require a longer-term payback. The heating system often is there for that. Windows can be there for that. And so This mechanism is similar to what you've heard about with the Renew Boston Trust. And one of the work lines that I oversee is the city's municipal energy unit, which is a busy small group of excellent professionals these days, because they've just rolled out Boston Community Choice Electricity. But they also administer the Renew Boston Trust, which is built on this idea of having long-term contracts where the energy savings pays back the loan, and where you're able to do this bundling of energy measures where quick paybacks help pay for longer term paybacks. So that's, in my view, the key reason that this mechanism is so important. I think it's important to stress that there's no liability concern for the city. This is just an order to allow us to participate in a statewide program. It's an opt-in program. So this council action is vital for us to be able to do that. The loans are, the payments for those loans are collected on our property tax bills. So that's why it's property assessed clean energy finance. And so we are working with the finance cabinet and all the mechanisms involved in making sure our property tax collection system is capable of collecting the payments for these loans and then passing them back to mass development to deal with how that loan is structured. So mass development itself is not issuing any Commonwealth financing for this. It's an open market, third-party direct financing. So the whole thing is a platform that facilitates private risk capital to help finance private property to do long-term energy efficiency implementation.
Great. Thanks, Brad. Appreciate that. So just so I have this right, if I own a 6-family and apply for this and get a loan for $50,000 to put in air source heat pumps, or I'm not sure what the cost would be on a building of that size, the terms of the repaid loan would go through the city and be assessed to the city's property tax?
So first, the minimum loan is $250,000 under this program, just to make that.
No, that's fair. I just
all the assessment of the viability of loan is done by mass development in partnership with the Department of Energy Resources. And so the property owner would work through whether that loan has the kind of energy measures that can be predicted to pay back the loan from the savings, similar to the mechanism that's actually guaranteed in the Renew Boston Trust. And that's worked out at state government. And then that loan is, the payment for that loan is placed on the property tax. The city simply collects those payments and then turns them back to mass development for the processing of the loan payment. It's a mechanism for collecting the loans and to connecting them to the piece of property, so that if the property sells, the idea is that the loan can stay with that property.
Oh, interesting.
So there are a lot of mechanics that are very important to how this operates, and you can go down a rabbit hole quite quickly. But the key thing to know is that the first of all, municipal liens maintain their priority. The primary mortgage holder has to give his consent. And so that's been a process by which the banking industry and the movement for having these property assessed clean energy programs has had to work out exactly how that prioritization of liens works. And indeed, the Massachusetts program, like other programs in the country, do require the mortgage holder to make consent. And the last framing point I would make, Chair O'Malley, is that you may have heard for 10 years or so a great deal of activity around residential PACE. That is not part of this program. And it is something that I'm just going to say here in a hearing before City Council about PACE. It's a mechanism we actually have concerns about because it is ripe for predatory loan making with individuals to put solar panels and go into expensive energy efficiency on their homes. And so it's under a lot of very serious investigation by the government for its practices. We've been approached by people who want us to support the state legislature to authorize residential PACE, and we have told them that we don't support that mechanism. And I would continue to advise the chief and the mayor not to until there is a real green light that all the issues around having this done at the residential level are addressed. This is large, commercial buildings, large multifamily, institutional buildings.
No, I appreciate that. And certainly the consumer confidence is something that has to be paramount to this. So I appreciate the sort of the nuanced approach between sort of the smaller residential and the larger scale things. But just back to the terms of the loan, because I'm just curious, this seems, I mean, of course, this is a great program that I'm going to support, and I anticipate the council will unanimously vote tomorrow on accepting our ability to participate in this. But is this, I guess it seems like it's needlessly complicated, that perhaps it's more attractive and to make it more people do it to break up the terms of the loan, but just to have the loan associated with the property tax. I understand wanting to have the improvements stay with the house, but I also think that that's, any person who's selling his or her house, would quite likely make improvements to make it more attractive. So I guess I'm still not seeing why that is. This could be the way the law is written, and it's a moot point, but I'm kind of.
So it's in part that, Counselor, it's in part that this is the setup it is, but, and it may be beneficial to hear from Brenda through some of the advocacy and some of the research that she's done on properties. But one thing I would say is that it's a major barrier to make these investments that you're gonna recoup the investment over a very long period of time. And it is the rare property owner that may own a building for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. We have a very active market in Boston. And so to actually get the benefits from these energy retrofits, the financing has to stay with the building to get those benefits. Brenda, I don't know if there's anything you want to add.
Yeah, I would say in addition to the loan staying with the building at time of sale, it also increases the confidence, I would say, from private investors or lenders, because this financing is primary to other types of financing except for actual municipal taxes. And so the lenders are more confident that they would actually be repaid over the long term.
No, that's fair. And again, this isn't a sticking point with me. It's just more out of curiosity. Brad, you mentioned the minimum loan amount is $250,000. Is there a maximum loan amount associated with this?
Brenda, is there a max?
The maximum is the amount of energy savings that are projected from it, just to ensure that the financing is actually able to be paid back through the energy savings.
Energy savings over how long the period?
20 years.
Over 20 years or the life of the equipment that's installed.
Gotcha. And would this fund be available to retrofit a building and actually make it net zero carbon or net zero positive?
So, Councilor, I have to just jump in and say it is not a fund. It is a mechanism, a platform. It is an open market, third-party, direct financing. So there are lenders who will find property owners who want to do energy efficiency improvements.
But so theoretically, Brad, if I owned, a 15,000 square foot office building, could I make my building energy net zero positive or net positive or net zero carbon using this mechanism as a way to assess capital that I would then repay over the life of the building?
Another tool.
It's a tool.
Right.
Absolutely.
Good.
It's a vital tool. It's a vital tool. Sure. I mean, we're discovering that the power of long-term energy efficiency loans. The Renew Boston Trust is a self-funded program. It is bringing tens of millions of dollars of energy and water improvements to municipal buildings based on this exact same mechanism. So the state legislature has set it up that Mass Development organizes the sort of payment sequence that's involved when a third-party direct financing open market lender accesses the platform, but DOER has to review the project and take a look at the savings to loan ratio to make sure that the predicted savings of the project are such that the loan can be repaid. Similar to the Renew Boston Trust, it doesn't require the contractual guarantee that's at the very heart of the RBT program, but it uses that same basic insight that savings on energy improvements can pay back the loan that you use to make those energy improvements.
Sure. No, you're preaching my language. And so has there been thought about how we're going, provided that this passes and then we're able to offer this as a platform? Are we going to use, Boston Water and Sewer bills to sort of do some outreach, alert, building owners that they could take advantage of this? Will that be determined later?
So, Councilor, I think there's an opportunity not only through the Main Streets program, but also the Boston Planning and Development Agency, and so the entire economic cabinet to make people aware of this. But I also think there's a strong outreach opportunity as we develop our carbon emission standard in the city of Boston, which will affect an enormous amount of buildings because we're looking at dropping, the Berto threshold of 35,000 down to 20,000, which means there's going to be a lot of new property owners who are going to be interested in retrofits to come into compliance with the carbon emission standard. So this will give us an opportunity to directly engage with those who may benefit most from this program.
That's right. And Chris, do you know what percentage of our greenhouse gas emissions come from buildings in the city of Boston?
It's over 60%.
Over 70%, I believe, or closer to 70%. So thank you for that. Thank you all for that great work. I'll now turn the floor over to Councilor Braden, followed by Councilor Bach.
How does this program dovetail in, Eversource and the energy company? This is more for residential. Is there an equivalent heat loan, as they call it, for commercial buildings? That's sort of, they're more like grants actually, or they're loans for commercial buildings, just as they are for residential buildings?
Well, this is sort of parallel to all the work that's done on the utility administer efficiency programs, including the heat loan, where ratepayers to pay back, buy down the payback of the loan. It's a tremendous incentive. So that all the heat loan activity will continue under the efficiency programs. This is another tool. It's not directly related to Mass Save. It's not linked in any organizational way to the Mass Save program. But a private property owner who gets third-party financing for an energy efficiency improvement would absolutely want her contractor to maximize the incentives that are available through Mass Save and the efficiency programs that the utilities administer. That's an incredibly important part of how the energy improvements can pay for themselves. In the Renew Boston Trust, we have like $10 million of savings from the improvements that are sweetened by, say, $1 million of utility incentives. That's just a general example. But that would be similar for any property owner who's working with a lender to then go to mass development and say, I would like to access this platform for having a loan repayments collected on my municipal tax bill, and proceed from there. DOER would look at the loan to savings ratio, and they would absolutely include the incentives of the efficiency programs in understanding the cash flow. That's the key issue with this mechanism, is that you install something efficient, it saves on your utility bills, and that difference is cash flow. Those are resources that can repay whatever you needed to spend to make that improvement.
And I would just point out that this goes beyond what Mass Save can offer for this. For instance, Mass Save does not do renewables. They don't do solar PV. which this program could finance, and some of the deeper energy efficiency measures.
Yeah, they do solar hot water. I think the challenge really for this is to simplify, not oversimplify, but to communicate with people in like a flow chart or something, exactly how they can benefit from this program. And because there's a few moving parts to it that's not completely obvious to someone, and especially someone who hasn't thought about the potential of energy efficiency for their buildings before.
Chief Cook's point about the emerging carbon performance standard, we feel a real obligation in the Cabinet of Environment, Energy, and Open Space to help the constituents of Boston comply with these very necessary upcoming actions that are so critical for achieving our climate goals. And so, yes, we will find a way to make sure people know about it and work to connect with mass development to start the process of connecting with a third-party lender who can help them.
So what size of a building does the carbon emission standards apply to? Is it going down to like 20,000 square feet, did you say, or?
Chris?
Yes, Counselor.
20,000 square feet?
Yes,
Yeah.
which would dovetail with the net zero planning at the BPDA.
And then are there buildings that are going to be exempt from these standards, or does that apply to old buildings, or does it apply to all buildings?
So
or new buildings?
So that is part of the policy development process that we're in right now. I don't think any building, so I wouldn't use the word exempt, Counselor. I would say that all buildings the ordinance will apply to. How it applies will be different, right? And so you can imagine that the energy use between a hospital as opposed to a residential apartment building is radically different. And so we can't approach the way the ordinance applies. But is our intention that there's interaction between those buildings and the ordinance no matter what?
Very good. Thank you. That's all now, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Braden. Councillor Bach, you have the floor, followed by Councillor Saibi George.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to ask, so this question of the loans being paid back via the property tax mechanism, I assume that that's in part to make them more attractive to lenders, because people paying their property tax is a fairly sure thing, because it obviously endangers their property ownership not to do so. And I can see why that would sort of facilitate capital supporting these long-term investments. I'm just wondering how we're thinking about it on the sort of city enforcement side. I mean, I heard you say that that municipal liens take precedence, but just like, if someone's sort of paying their property taxes but not paying their loan, how does that affect their standing with the city? Does the city have to prorate? If you give me your money for your property tax but not your loan, do I have to give some portion of that to the lender? Like, I'm just trying to understand, because I don't think we're usually in the business of enforcing other people's financial claims in our property tax collection system. And so I just want to understand how this is going to work.
Yeah, the initial thinking is that it's a better assessment, similar to the CPA that people receive on their bills. But there is no risk to the city. So it's an interesting question, Counselor, and we're happy to get, our treasurer and the auditor's opinion on it and get back to you.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to. I totally think we should take up the option. I think it's challenging to get these kinds of long-term retrofits funded. But I just want to be mindful of like what kind of an enforcement relationship it puts the city in with folks. And obviously with the CPA, that's another fund that we manage, which is a little bit of a different situation.
Of course. Yeah, no, it's a fair point. Happy to get back to you, unless Brenda or Brad, you actually have the answer already.
Yes, so Mass Development has
Brenda,
told us
thanks.
that property tax would always, if only a portion has been paid of the total bill, the city property tax would always be paid first. And then in the event of a default, the loan can't be accelerated, and so only the current unpaid amount would be collected.
Got it.
We don't enforce the energy loan. If there's non-payment, then the mechanisms that Brenda described go into effect, and then the property owner has to deal with her mortgage holder and everything else to sort out the inability to pay back the loan. But our mechanism operates that the municipal taxes are paid first, and then in essence, it gets thrown back to mass development.
Got it. Okay. And then, I mean, what sorts of things, I guess one question I have is, I do think this kind of long-term finance is helpful. But I also think that like we have a fundamental problem in this field that some of the changes that we want people to make would make good financial sense if we were actually internalizing the externalities of carbon emissions. But we're not. And so there might be something that we want people to do for their buildings that would save us a lot of carbon, but isn't going to save them a lot of money. And so I'm just trying to understand sort of what are the categories of changes that we feel like this does enable, where there's enough savings over that long-term period. Because like you say, right now the incentive is just to do the short-term savings payback thing. There's another category of things that this probably isn't going to touch because we would need to put a price on carbon in some sense to make them viable. But what's that middle category here?
I think it opens up the opportunity for loans to pay for envelope improvements and complex insulation work. Could help pay for windows, things that don't have a traditional short-term payback like lighting. That's the example where we always talk about cream skimming in this energy efficiency lending discussion, where the quick paybacks will, land in a deal for those quick paybacks only to be done. But this platform of opening it up to 20 years does open up the opportunity for the longer term paybacks to be blended into the project that the loan connects to. It's up to DOER to evaluate the energy efficiency of the loan. We do not have any say over that. That's a mechanism that is set by the state legislature. The only role we play is that we make our property tax collection system available for the collection of these loan payments, as Chief Cook said, similar to a betterment assessment, and then work with mass development on making sure that those payments get back to mass development. They have hired, Brenda, do you want to talk about how mass development has set up the system to deal with the back end of getting payments back? They've hired.
Sure. Yes, they've hired a third-party servicer to collect payments from municipalities, and then direct those payments to the appropriate lenders. And I would just add that this is not while mass development did launch this in July, this is not necessarily a brand new program. 35 municipalities have opted into it already in Massachusetts. And at least one of them already has a project going through the system. So we would not be the first.
Got it. Okay, great. All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Those are all my questions.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Councillor Asaibi George, you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any other questions. My colleagues and you have asked some pretty thought-provoking and informative questions that have taught me a lot through those responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Asaibi George. Seeing and hearing no further colleagues on the Zoom, and I do not believe we have any folks looking to offer public testimony, although Shane Pack will correct me if I am wrong. I'm going to conclude this hearing. I want to thank all of you. Again, I will be calling for passage of both of these dockets, likely tomorrow, but potentially the following week if for whatever reason just we can't get it facilitated by tomorrow. But certainly these are, but what the grant is fantastic. I look forward to checking in, Zoe, with you perhaps in a couple months just to sort of check in even informally to share with the colleagues. And then this one, really look forward to helping us publicize this to many of the larger commercial entities in our districts as well, because I think this could be really exciting. Chief Cook, do you or any members of your team have any concluding thoughts?
No, Council. We just appreciate the City Council's partnership on our adaptation and mitigation efforts. Thank you.
And we appreciate the great work of you and your team. Really, you guys have been so committed to this and wonderful partners for all of us. And obviously the urgency of this work has never been more fierce. So look forward to continuing the partnership and getting some great things done. I hereby am calling to conclude this hearing on dockets 1000 as well as 1033. The Committee on Environment, Sustainability, Resiliency, and Parks is hereby adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.